Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any other issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button. Your membership options that will lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today, in our running discussion on the existence or non-existence of God, these questions I've been asking lately are really designed to focus on the omni-God, because one of the things I noticed in my series, The Case Against God's Existence, was that the omni-God took particularly nasty knocks. And so I'm laying out further questions and more stuff, kind of going after the omni-God. And the reason I'm doing that is I think I can probably draw a conclusion that the omni-God does not exist. I think there's a good arguments against that type of deity. And so I'm continuing to ask these questions. And today I'm asking, a simple question. If God is benevolent, why does he abort so many babies? Or why does he cause so many abortions? I could also restate the question as, why does he allow so many abortions? For those of you who want to get God off the hook for a lack of agency, well, he doesn't really abort babies. The fall has caused this problem, and God just looks on passively while they all happen. All these abortions happen. Now, I'm not even talking about human abortion. The argument along this lines doesn't actually deal with the moral discussion of pro-life, pro-choice, or whatever that. This argument for the existence of God is more focused on the type of abortion that happens almost every day, which is a natural kind of spontaneous abortion where a woman has a miscarriage or the zygote doesn't implant into the wall of the uterus. And in fact, the more scientists study human reproduction, they discovered with women that 75% of pregnancies end in spontaneous abortion. In other words, the vast majority. Only 25% of pregnancies actually go into a state of what you would call a pregnancy where people would even notice. In fact, a lot of spontaneous abortions simply happen and nobody ever knows. Okay, the woman never even really knows that she's pregnant because the egg gets fertilized, but it never implants in the uterine wall. And by a lot of people's definition, that's life or humans. And all of a sudden, poof, it just doesn't happen, and she never knows, okay? She never knows. With 75% of the abortions, it's like, I look at that, a spontaneous abortion, I think to myself, okay, I have 3 kids. That means my now ex-wife probably got pregnant about 12 times, okay? And only 3 of them made it. That's what we're talking about with the average, okay? So that's kind of how it works. It means that women get pregnant or get fertilized far more than they actually carry anything to term. All these spontaneous abortions just happen, okay? And so the argument that kind of attacks the omni-God using this issue goes something like this. God has the power, if omnipotent, and the knowledge, if omniscient, to stop the fact that 75% of pregnancies end in spontaneous abortion, okay? We'd have to assume that God has the power to stop that problem. Because everybody talks about pregnancy being a miracle from God or whatever. I disagree, of course, but, a lot of theists believe along those lines. He certainly has the knowledge. I mean, he's the great physician, so on and so forth. Or, other people, just looking at the omniscience of God, he would know when every woman gets pregnant, when every one of her eggs gets fertilized, and he would know when this would happen, either by actively causing this spontaneous abortion or passively allowing it to happen. God is kind of saying implicitly or directly that all of these deaths must serve some sort of greater purpose or greater good. Now, some who want to get God off the hook of being an active agent, well, then it's an implicit statement that somehow these abortions that serve from a greater good standpoint, that somehow, because of the fall of man and all the results of that, the spontaneous abortion, somehow that serves a greater good or whatever. The problem with a lot of these spontaneous abortions is nobody knows that they exist. How would they serve a greater good? I mean, for the vast majority of human history, we didn't even know this was going on. So, what greater good at this point could they have served? And it seems to me that if this does serve a greater good, and this is just one illustration of many, then that greater good would be understood and known to everyone. It would be stated by God what the greater good of this is, but it's kind of avoided. The fact that most of these spontaneous abortions go unknown means there can be no real meaning derived from them. There's no journey of life purpose to them. There's no, these show us X something, okay? I mean, a lot of Christians and other theists will get past it. Well, it just shows the results of the fall, except for one thing. A lot of you Christians hold to the sanctity of life. What would make life sacred would be to show that God carefully takes care of every life until it gets out into the world. That doesn't happen. Okay. Now, I'm sure that some of you are going to run behind you can't know what God would want excuse. Okay, and that's what it is. It's an excuse. But what purpose would this serve? Okay, it's not a question of whether they serve any purpose at all. Any one of these lives basically is purposeless. The egg gets fertilized, it doesn't implant in the wall, it gets washed out of the woman's system. What purpose did that serve? Give me one. Okay, I don't see it. Okay, and as from my point of view, as an atheist and a person who believes in evolution, I can see where basically evolution or life is just kind of shotgunning like it always does, hoping something sticks. But if we bring God into the picture, now we have God basically shotgunning. Okay, by his purpose, he's shotgunning. Okay, he's created a reproductive system and doesn't maintain it. Okay, he just lets it happen. Where basically he's hoping that 1 out of 4 of these things work. Okay, and that's really kind of a counter to either his design or his purpose. Okay, what is the purpose of this? To me, there's no good answer forthcoming to this kind of massive scale death as serving some sort of greater purpose. Human life just doesn't seem to be sacred to God as people claim. Okay, he's allowing miscarriages, spontaneous abortions at a very early age. The fact is, when it comes to it, God, who has the power and the knowledge to stop all this, seems to either actively being caused by it, because if you subscribe to the theology of God, there's not a single maverick molecule that God doesn't control or act on, then God is actually causing this thing to happen. He's causing every spontaneous abortion and miscarriage. Now, a lot of people like to, at this point, to get God off the hook for certain things that seem, reprehensible. That's pretty obvious. A lot of people go through a lot of mental gymnastics to get past this. And so they say, well, he's not really causing it, it's just a passive result of the fall. Well, that kind of makes it worse, because God then creates the universe knowing full well what Adam and Eve are going to do, or whatever, origin story you choose to have. He knows what's going to happen, and yet he creates it anyway, knowing that there's going to be, throughout all of history, this massive scale of human life and death. Now, I don't really want to get into the discussion when human life gets. That's not the purpose. We're talking about God and what he does. Okay, so some even theists will argue, well, it's not really human life. And a lot of other religions would argue, well, you don't really acknowledge the humanness of a human until after they've been born a certain number of days. For instance, the Jewish tradition doesn't acknowledge really that a baby boy is human and alive until 8 days afterwards when they circumcise the child. When girls get it worse. It's like 40 days, as I recall. And so it's like there's this, in many cultures, there's this open acknowledgement that this baby really isn't alive or really a human until they've reached a certain stage after being born. And that's kind of a reaction to all this. But for those who think that life is sacred right from the get-go, or human life is sacred right from the get-go, God doesn't seem to echo that claim with his actions, or with his knowledge, or with his benevolence, which calls all three into question in one shape or another. Either God doesn't have the power to stop this, okay, there's just some natural mechanization of the earth of life in the universe that he can't stop. He's not omniscient, he doesn't know what's going on, or he can't know what is going on, or he's not benevolent, he doesn't give a crap, okay? The fact of the matter that this natural process that is going on, if there is a God, then he's either callous to it, doesn't have the power to stop it, or he really doesn't know when it's happening. And that kind of undercuts the whole omni-God. Okay. I think this argument really does cut against the omni-God quite hard. And it's just one example of things that happen that, it's a problem of evil, question, quote unquote, or it's a problem of this is a natural process that seems to be purposeless. In this particular case, I think what is the purpose of the massive amount of spontaneous abortions in God's economy? What is it that he's trying to show to humanity? I mean, most of this happens without anybody knowing that it's going on. It certainly doesn't affect our life, very, very closely. I don't see too many funerals for a zygote, because it's usually not known. And so on and so forth. You end up, with miscarriages and things like that. I reflect on this in my own life. Ed wouldn't be an only child if it wasn't for this problem, because my father theorizes that based on the actions of my mother, that there were 2 other times that she got pregnant, but neither one of them took. And given this scenario of spontaneous abortions, it's quite possible my mother got pregnant more than that and just never knew. The point of the matter is, it's this unknown factor that kind of puts God in the position of actually causing the abortions or simply allowing them to happen. And so, why? What's the point, okay, of any of this when it's unknown to anyone? What is he trying to teach humanity if all of these spontaneous abortions happen with nobody really even knowing they're going on? And throughout history, before we had the medical technology to discover this, these were going on, okay, all the way back. What would be the point, okay? And it really undercuts either God being benevolent or God being omnipotent. Those two particularly hit it hard. He either doesn't know, okay, he's certainly, he's present everywhere. Maybe he can't be present every place, so that kicks omnipresence in the head a little bit. My point is this is just one example of how something happens in the universe that kind of shows that God doesn't care. Now, as a naturalist, I would say the universe doesn't care. And evolution has created a process where it kind of just shotguns reproduction. And this is not just seen in humans, it's everywhere. The fact that, like, frogs lay hundreds of eggs and only a few of them actually make it to adult froghood is shotgunning. Okay, it's the way life works. And I don't have a problem with talking about the evil or benevolence of it. So when human reproduction says, some of these just don't work out, well, to me, that's just the way it is. And it's not a thing there. But once you inject the existence of God into it, particularly an omnipotent and benevolent God, all of a sudden that calls into question either the omnipotence of that God or the benevolence of that God, or both. And so we end up with an argument here that I think has a lot of force, where it takes a situation and pushes it to the nth degree of pointing out, well, this kind of cuts against any kind of purpose. And if God creates this purpose in you, why does this exist? A lot of it doesn't really work for that type of God. And it kind of hits that kind of God hard. Well, that's the question for the day, for the discussion, the running discussion on Thursdays of the existence of God and his attributes. And so I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure there'll be plenty of comments that I'll look at and read. I'm having more and more trouble responding to comments, but mostly from a time standpoint and the fact that there are so many now. I really appreciate that. I'm glad you guys are using some of my stuff to have a good springboard to discussion. So comment away. I just kind of read through a lot of them and try to see what I can do about them, or whether they even deserve a response. So thank you very much for commenting. I'd be very interested to see some responses to this question, if there are any good ones at all. But thanks for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. The channel's growing. Thank you very much. I appreciate every single person that is involved in it. You guys are awesome. As always, live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So make sure that you're taking all your time, your money, your opportunities, and spending them on yourself and the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.